This video was brought to you by the lovely members of my Patreon. It's this weird thing. Like, I've had some conversations with dominants who I can tell are probably a little bit more used to speaking to cross-dressers or people who have a sissification fetish. And they'll say shit like, I'm going to make you feel like a real woman by doing this, this, and this, and that to you. Now, sir, hey guys, it's Kat, and it's time for another episode of True Tea. I want to thank you guys so much for joining me here for yet another episode of True Tea. We do these videos every single Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I appreciate those of you guys who are here every single week, ready for a fresh brew of True Tea. Thanks for joining us, especially those of you guys who leave those long-ass comments. I really appreciate the heck out of you guys. Anyway, how are you guys? What are you guys up to? What have you guys been doing? What's new in your life? I thought that I would, in honor of me still wearing this gosh damn eye patch, show you guys this old bag that I made when I was in college. Some of you guys who've been following me for a bit know that in college I went through a pirate phase, and this was my daily bag. My friend, she gave me this pirate flag, and I went to the at Cal Arts, and the lead up to the cafeteria, people were always like getting rid of their clothes and things, and so people would often leave, you know, random clothes, and someone left a pair of like pinstriped pants, and I made it like the lining and also the back of this bag, and the bag's base is a pair of black jeans. Like, I was all into upcycling. I think that I forget where this zipper came from. I think I got the zipper on Amazon or eBay, actually. Back in the day, girl, I used to love eBay. I used to buy all types of eBay wigs back in the day, those Japanese like fashion wigs. Oh girl, those were some times. But yeah, I just want to show this with you to you guys. I love this bag. It is like my original gothy backpack, or bag rather. So yeah, just thought that would be cool to show you guys. Anyway, we're going to be having a conversation about being transgender in the BDSM community. But before we do that, I would highly suggest you run to your kitchen and grab yourself something to drink. In fact, I need to do that right now. All right, I am drinking a AHA brand strawberry and cucumber, 0 calorie, 0 everything, fresh sparkling water. The more I drink these, the more I actually really like them. I'm still trying to find my favorite like 0 everything drink. So let me know if you guys have any favorites. So yeah. Anyway, let me take another sip of this and let's get right into the conversation. So I'm actually really surprised that I've never specifically spoken about this before, because this is like something that is a really big part of me being in the BDSM community. And I thought that I would shed some light on it for those of you guys who are curious what it's like being a trans woman who is a submissive in the BDSM community, because I've got a lot of thoughts, I got a lot of feelings, I got a lot of perspectives. So let's talk about it. So I've been in the BDSM community right now for about 4 years, I would say. And it's, as we've talked about several times on this YouTube channel, it's had its ups and it's had its downs, it's had its positives, it's had its negatives. Ultimately, for me, I love being in spaces where people feel open to express themselves. As somebody who has been through sexual violence and also dealt with not really ever questioning myself about what turned me on, sex and kink and intimacy as a thing that only existed in my life to pleasure men, who of course at a certain point in my life were my survival. For me, my introduction to BDSM was really just me sitting down and asking myself those questions. What turns me on? What excites me? What are some physical, paraphilias that I have that I want to explore, And for me, BDSM has been a very healing experience that has encouraged me to be more honest and communicative about what I like and what I don't like. And for that reason, it's been a mostly positive thing for me. Y'all know me, I'm a Virgo. I will overthink everything. I will overanalyze everything. you know, so to keep that in mind. But for what it's worth, it hasn't all been amazing and positive. And I've definitely had a bit of a different journey than some people because I am a transgender woman, specifically a Black trans woman, specifically a Black transgender woman who is submissive. So that's kind of what I want to talk to you guys about. It's like the little weird experiences that I've had in the community. So I will start out this conversation by saying that there is actually a pretty large representation of transgender women in BDSM. One of the biggest dungeons in LA is owned by a transgender woman. She is a world-renowned, well-known, well-accepted, well-celebrated dominatrix. She runs one of the big conventions. And I would say that one of the most bizarre aspects of BDSM in the environment that is Los Angeles is that BDSM in a lot of ways is fairly trans positive. There's always there's constantly going to be exceptions to the rule. And one of the things you'll learn as you get into the BDSM community is that there are a lot of different people who have different perspectives about and different philosophies about what BDSM is and how it works. But interestingly enough, for a lot of transgender people in Los Angeles, the BDSM community can be more accepting than other communities. I was on this Zoom munch. The first munch I started going to way back in the day has this virtual Zoom munch. And there is this girl who is trans. She's recently out as a transgender woman. And she was going through it in this chat because she really, really wanted to go back to the dungeons. This was somebody who recently came out as trans, went to a BDSM dungeon, and immediately felt accepted in a way that she didn't in most of the spaces that she was in. And right as she was getting into the BDSM community, quarantine happens. Right as she was getting into the BDSM community, dungeons shut down. And so she was in this weird position where she had just discovered this thing that made her feel loved and made her feel warm and welcome and things like that. This community that affirmed her. And now it doesn't exist, or it's not existing in a healthy way. She found somebody who was apparently throwing this like underground BDSM party, and pretty much everyone in the chat said that it wasn't a really good idea for her to do that. It wasn't a good idea for her to go to that event. And she got really defensive. She got really, 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 really defensive about being a trans person and going to these events and feeling like people are judging her for going to these events. Of course, she's in a room full of BDSMers who have been doing this for decades, but to her, people discouraging her from going to a private BDSM event felt like an attack. And of course, there's a part of me that was very annoyed by how irrational it all was. But at the same time, as someone who's been there, I definitely understand the feeling of this is a thing that truly affirms me. This is a thing that makes me feel welcomed and loved, because what some people might not get is that for a lot of trans women specifically, they're not going to find a lot of spaces that are affirming to them in terms of how they sexually express themselves. A lot of gay spaces don't really want trans women there if this person is bisexual. A lot of lesbian spaces don't really want trans people there. And so there is this weird sort of thing that happens where some of these communities, some of these alternative communities are more welcoming than the communities you would probably assume as an outsider would be welcoming. So she felt cut off from the community and didn't like that people were judging her for wanting to be part of it, right? But of course she was new. And she, you know, when you're new, you have a lot of experiences because you're fresh meat. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to her about, but I didn't get to talk to her about, was just that maybe it's not all that glitters is gold. And so since I didn't get to have that conversation with her, I'm gonna have it with you guys. So like I said, when you're brand new in the BDSM community, you're fresh meat, you know, especially if you're, you know, a woman, or people read you as one, and you're submissive, people are going to be really excited that you're there. And I know that for a lot of people that feels great. I do enjoy going to places where I feel like people are really happy that I'm there, you know. And we'll unpack that. This is another video, but one of the things that I've been reckoning with in the quarantine, post going out all the time, is that some of these spaces are not healthy for me because I'm basically there as the sexually open, sexy thing that sells the event to men. Another conversation for another day. Maybe we'll make a video about that. But long story short, when you're new in the community, people are very excited about you. And this is not, you know, in so many ways, a lot of my interactions within the BDSM community are not different from my interactions in the vanilla world, but things are a little bit heightened because there is a lot of conversation about consent. And there are a lot of people who have, you know, they're coming here to do the thing, you know? And so I've ran into a lot of really weird, uncomfortable situations around me being trans, me being openly trans, because a common thing that happens with me is that a man will see me at a club and be interested in me and attracted to me and pursue me all night. And upon finding out that I'm transgender, this man may completely withdraw his interest, right? Now, I don't have a problem with that, but I will say that there is a little bit of an interesting discrepancy, I think, to point out here. For a lot of people, probably for most people, BDSM is fairly sexual. BDSM is something that is directly connected to who you're sexually attracted to, how you're experiencing attraction to them. And that's just kind of what it is for a lot of people. For me, BDSM can be sexual, but is not always. There are some people who are amazing shibari artists who I am not physically attracted to. There are some men that really know how to do amazing fire play that it makes me very, very curious, right? But I'm not attracted to them physically, right? And I think that that's a little bit more common with women, where a lot of women will, like, so for me, for example, I'm not going to say that I don't bottom for people that I'm not attracted to, but there have been so many times where I've bottomed for somebody because they are competent, because I know that they are a safe player, because I know that they are experienced with the thing. And that on its own makes me drawn to them and want to bottom for them. You know, I think, I don't do rope, but I do rope. I do rope with my partners, but I don't do public pickup play rope. I think a lot of the rope guys are a great example of this, where there are a lot of rope guys who are maybe not, rope is interesting because there's a lot of different types of people who do rope. It's really common for rope to be a very sort of nerdy, hyper-focused thing. And that's why a lot of BDSMers aren't crazy about it, because a lot of rope people will just sit there for hours doing like these intricate knots. And if you're someone who's looking for a quick little, that might not be exciting to you, right? So long story short, there's a lot of people who are maybe not typically physically attractive, but are really, really good at rope. And some of these guys will come to, because it's usually just guys, will come to these BDSM events and they'll do rope. I'll never forget, I was at this party and this like really, really gorgeous black girl was getting tied up by this just gremlin of a man. But he was really good at it. He really, really knew what he was doing. And it was clear that she wasn't like physically attracted to him, but he was physically attracted to her. So I point all that out to say that there have definitely been times where I've wanted to bottom for somebody, and I'm not necessarily thinking in terms of we need to be sexually compatible for us to do BDSM. And there are people that I do BDSM with who I know are not attracted to me because they're not interested in having sex with me because I'm a trans woman, but they do like playing with me because they enjoy my body shape, or they like the way that my body looks in rope and things like that. And so, you know, it's sometimes it's that. And I think that's kind of the difference between certain players and other players. The people who are like okay to play with people they're not attracted to, at least in my experience, are generally the people that are there more as part of the community. That's the reason why I'm there. They're not there to just find hot girls to do naughty things too. You know what I mean? So I say all that to say that yes, a lot of men approach me because they're sexually attracted to me. And that has often meant that I have a weird sort of conversation with them. Because here's the thing, when it comes to spanking me or something like that, right? Spanking is like the only pickup play that I'll do, right? It is the only pickup play that I'll do. unless I kind of know somebody and I've watched them play and do other stuff, right? Spanking me does not require me to have a pussy, you know? I don't need to have a pussy for you to look at my butt and to want to spank it, you know? That's not a requirement that's needed, you know what I mean? But for a lot of men on their side, it is, you know? I may be really enjoying the way that a man is spanking me, but he is probably really getting off on how spanking me can bring me to an orgasm, which obviously spanking a trans woman and spanking a cis woman is different. So I've had a lot of situations where men have pursued me, expressed attraction to me, you know, chased me essentially. I have that conversation with them and then it turns into, oh, I'm sorry. I'm not experienced with that. I don't do that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I respect everyone's choice not to be involved with a trans person. That being said, it's definitely, it's created a bit of a complex. I talked about this a lot in one of my first videos I did about the quarantine and about me just recognizing that some of these spaces aren't healthy for me because listen, I love BDSM, but it really is a mindfuck to walk around a BDSM club, sexy, cute, naked, whatever, and have men express attraction to you so frequently, but withdraw it once they know that you're trans. That does at a certain point mess with your head, especially since I have the standpoint of it's okay for those men to reject me. It's okay for those men not to be interested in me. They don't have to do anything to prove that they're a good person or anything like that. It can be sort of hard to mentally take in, you know what I mean? And because it's hard for me to take in, I've definitely left a lot of BDSM events feeling a lot smaller than I did when I walked in. And so that's really just made me think a lot. And I've been really meditating on this for quite some time. Because there's this side of it, and then there's like the total opposite side of it, right? Now, like I said, there are quite a few transgender women. Well, let me walk that back. There are more transgender women in the BDSM community that I'm part of than there are trans men, right? I think that there's a lot of different nuances with the ways that trans people interact. So I've talked about this before, but I am a person who is not interested in men who are focused on or want to gain access to my genitalia. I'm not somebody who gets off on someone manually bringing me to an orgasm. For a lot of men, that is a focus of their BDSM. So there are men who are open to playing with trans women, but that is their thing. Their thing is that they want to be able to deal with that. I made a video not too long ago about a guy who wanted me to be part of his harem. And I found some very interesting things out about him recently. He has been trying to get me back in contact with him. And I talked to him about whether or not he's being COVID safe and things like that. And he said it's all a fake pandemic and da-da-da-da. Turned out he's voting for Trump and things like that. And I remember speaking to one of my partners about this, and he kind of explained something to me that really made me think a lot, because I have, unfortunately, in the BDSM community, like, it's not terribly uncommon for the men that I feel naturally drawn to turn out to be conservative, especially as somebody who subscribes to a very one-sided dynamic. The first events I started going to in Los Angeles were male-dominant, female-submissive events. And, you know, it's, of course, very, very possible that men can be dominant and very liberal and very open. That's very, very possible. Let's not get it twisted. Unfortunately, and I think if you live in LA, you kind of know this and kind of know some of the people I'm talking about, there really is a pretty large group of that kind of person who very much is a conservative, very much does subscribe to that, is voting for Trump, right? And that's kind of been a bit of a journey for me. And I talked to my partner about this, and one of the things he said to me was that I embody, for a lot of specifically white cis heterosexual men, everything they were raised not to be attracted to, not to be interested in. You know, because obviously I have a hard time understanding how somebody could vote for Trump but then want me. One of the many issues I had with this guy who wanted me to join his harem is he wanted to be able to have access to that part of my body. And I have plenty of positive kink dynamics with my partners that respect my boundaries there. You know what I mean? So it's like, it was really hard for me to totally get like why someone would feel like, because a lot of dominants, I mean, not a lot of dominants, they do have this thing where like your whole body is mine. If you submit to me, I need to be able to have all access to you. Now that's a particular type of dominant. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but it's incompatible with me. It's totally incompatible with me. I can't want to be with somebody who believes that they can pressure or force me, even in the context of a consensual kink scene, into doing something that I mentally can't do. I'm never gonna be excited by a man touching me there. I'm never gonna be excited by a man trying to get me off that way. It's just never gonna happen. It's something that just physically does not happen, you know? And it has been a bit rough because I've met these men who are open to being with trans women, open to topping trans women, but they want to top me in a way that makes me super uncomfortable. Super, 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 super uncomfortable. And so, yeah, it's definitely been a rough thing for me because I want, you know, the person who I do most of my BDSM with is my partner, Nathan. Nathan is what we like to call a top heavy switch. He predominantly dominates. He occasionally switches. He is not my dom. We don't have that dynamic exactly. He is my daddy, but he is not my dom. And so I'm free to sort of make those connections. And I have been a bit frustrated with that weird dichotomy of, on one hand, I will meet a man who is attracted to me genuinely and doesn't make me feel fetishized, but is not attracted to trans women. And then I'll meet a guy who is attracted to trans women, but his way of doing things with trans women is something that just makes me feel entirely uncomfortable. To this day, but the best dynamic I've had is with my partner, Nathan, you know? And is Nathan open to doing some of the things that these guys want to do? Sure. But he knows I don't like it and he respects that boundary. With some of these men, it's a debate. It's an argument. And I just absolutely do not have time for that, right? So there's another layer of this, and I don't know how this is going to be heard, but I'm going to talk about this very briefly because it is a bit of a frustration for me. So I do not list myself on any kink websites as transgender. I say it in my profile, but I don't list myself that way because a lot of times when you list yourself as trans, you get just a massive flow of chasers and fetishizers, and that's all people want, especially on like kink websites where a lot of these men are like married and they're just trying to find some like naughty thing to do when their wife is away, you know. Like, I don't want to do that. I don't want anything to do with that. I'm not interested in that at all whatsoever, so I don't put it there, right? But there are a lot of times where I do get reached out by people who are fetishists, and it's this weird thing. Like, I've had some conversations with dominants who I can tell are probably a little bit more used to speaking to cross-dressers or people who have a sissification fetish. And they'll say shit like, I'm going to make you feel like a real woman by doing this, this, and this, and that to you. Now, sir, I know that most heterosexual men are socialized to believe that a woman's gender is at the end of their dick, and, you know, validates women in any way. But that's not the case. I was a woman before I met you. I'm going to be a woman after I meet you. You don't define me by any fucking means, you know? And I hate that shit. There are people who are into trans people in the context of kink, but it's in a very like insidious, I want to say transphobic kind of way. Because of course, the moment you say, well, I am a woman and I transitioned at 15 and, you know, you don't define me, then it's like, oh, blah, 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 you know, all this shit, you know. I've had a lot of shitty conversations about me not really being a submissive because I stand up for myself. You know, like it's crazy, this sort of gaslighty bullshit that like men try, especially on trans women who they tend to assume are weaker and less willing to stand up for themselves because apparently, again, the validation is at the end of their dick. So they've been, raised to believe. And so I've had those weird interactions where it's like, holy shit, is this who is interested in me? Is that what it is? I just can't, right? Now, when it comes to trans women at the BDSM dungeons that I've seen and that I do know, I tend to see more trans women bottoming for cis women than I've ever seen trans women bottoming for cis men. Like across the board, I've often seen the trans woman being dominated by the cis woman at an event. I've often seen at certain parties where this can happen, the cis woman putting on a strap and doing things to the trans woman. And for me, there's just a lot of layers to that. You guys know that I'm not interested in women. I have a lot of weird intimacy issues around being intimate with women, but I don't bottom for women. I have done it in the past. It's never satisfied me or done much for me. It was a fun little thing, but it was like doesn't put me there. Nothing against the dominance that I have bottomed for, but it's just not for me. And I've always really been sensitive to this attitude that some cis women have that's very condescending to trans women. I've dealt with this a lot where you talk to a cis woman and you can just tell that similarly to straight men, they believe that they also have the ability to validate or invalidate a person's gender. This is something that comes up a lot in like feminization fetishes where, there is a lot of crossover. So, obviously cis men, trans women, cross-dressers, and sissies are not all the same thing. They're all very different, but there's a shitload of overlap. And there are some trans women who do enjoy this idea of a domineering cis woman feminizing them. I personally feel super crawl out of my skin uncomfortable with that. Like that is a dynamic that personally makes me feel really gross. I also consider quite a bit of sissification stuff to be very misogynistic inherently, which I will say that and leave it there. If you get off on it, good for you. I have a hard time being around it. I have a very hard time being around looking at men believing that wearing women's clothing makes them a bitch and a sissy and a this and this and that. And I get that for a lot of men, it's part of them sort of dealing with their internalized, toxic masculinity and things like that. But still, for me, it's a bit much. And unfortunately, I have been approached by these cis women who have this interest and have this fantasy, and I'm just not down with it. It's not personal to them. I'm just really, really not down with it. And I feel like if I were open to it, if I were down for it, I probably would have a dom right now. I'm sure there's tons of women out there who would love to have me, walking around on all fours for them. But that's just not my personal dynamic. So I guess often for me, being my particular kink, my particular BDSM, it's often made me feel a little bit, I don't know. I've often felt like I'm outside of the conversations. I've often felt like what I'm looking for is something that, it's weird. I walk into any BDSM event, men are interested in me. Men want to spank me. Men want to tie me up. I'm just going to say it. I'm not trying to say that I'm all that in a bag of chips, but have you seen me? I'm just kidding. I sound really arrogant, but I don't go anywhere in the BDSM community or the sex positive, any of these spaces where men aren't interested in me, aren't attracted to me. So it's a weird thing where that part is easy. It's just the accepting that I'm trans part that isn't. And that's definitely made it so that, again, I've gone to a lot of these events and walked in feeling hot and sexy, left feeling gross and ugly. Which is I'm kind of glad that a lot of these events aren't happening anymore. There's still some happening here and there, but most of them are not happening because, pandemic or whatever. So yeah, I guess it's been very, very interesting to me to sort of be in that. There's also another layer of this where a lot of people A lot of cis men who are open to playing with trans women want to play with a dominant trans woman. Listen, we've talked about this several times, but I, as a tall, confident Black trans woman, get all those little white boys in my inbox, and all they can do is talk about how much they want me to fuck their white boy ass with a BBC. Girl, it's just, God, it's all the projection, the racism. It's a lot. The race play to me is inherently racist. Maybe one time we'll do a video about that. I don't know. But you know, it's just a lot. It's a lot. And I feel often like I'm not what people want, but then I also am what people want. Like, I definitely, when I first moved to Los Angeles, bottomed for this guy for a while. And we did a lot of events and things together. Where I think he was definitely getting a lot of street cred for me bottoming for him. You know, him being seen topping a Black girl, him being seen topping a trans girl, that was all very like, ooh, you know. And I still to this day have men who are after me because they saw me with him, you know. And it's a weird thing, but you know, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I definitely respect that the girl who I was talking about feels like she missed out on a great community. Of course, she's bisexual, so she probably would definitely have more fun than I would. But it has been this weird experience where I do feel superficially accepted and loved and attractive and things like that. But it's been very hard for me to find a dominant willing to top me and willing to take me on. So, you know, I just sort of enjoy BDSM for the social aspect of it. I don't go to events expecting that a man's ever going to be interested in dominating me. The amount of openly pansexual dominant men in Los Angeles, that's a very, very small list. Because half of it too is like, there are definitely men who would do it, but don't want to do it at a dungeon. That's definitely a thing where there are some men who are afraid of potentially losing other partners because they top me, you know, and I'm not interested in that at all, but it's been a thing. I've definitely had men who were weird about doing things with me at clubs that want me to come over and, you know, to a private setting and play with them for the first time. And I'm so sorry. I've seen that movie many, many times. I watch a lot of ID channel and I know how that ends. So I'm gonna stay home. And I'll be good, you know? But yeah, so long story short, it's had its ups, it's had its downs. I love my community so much, and it is still a community that is fairly accepting and embracing to transgender people, but it is a community that's also just rife with all types of just not great stuff, and personal rejection. So, you know, when stuff opens up again, my vibe is definitely going to be, let's have private parties and stop doing this dungeon shit. Because as fun as it is, it does get old, especially when you learn how many people are abusive in the community. So anyway, another conversation for another day. I will talk to you guys later. If you've made it through this entire video, please put this emoji in the comment box below, and also give me a comment about how you feel about this. I would love to hear, you know, from people who are transgender in the BDSM community, especially trans men. There are not enough trans men that I've seen. Most of the trans men that I have met in the BDSM community are submissive. I've only met maybe 3. All of them are submissive. Pretty much all of them bottom for cis men. So that's interesting. That's a kind of a weird experience, but you know, I don't know. I'd love to know if there are any dominant trans men out there. Let me know where you're at, and you know, let me know if you're looking for a bottom. Anyway, put this emoji in the comment box below if you want to be cool. You want to be part of the cool kids club. You know, I'm not forcing you to do anything, but I'm just saying everyone's doing it. All the cool kids are doing it. So if you want to be part of the cool kids club, you know, just think about it. Just give it a thought. You know, I don't no pressure or whatever. It just is the thing that's going to make or break your high school life. So let me know. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys next week. Right now, you're looking at 2 videos you can watch if you would like to continue to sip true tea right here on the channel. Also in the corner, there are several ways you can send me a tip if that's something that you liked, you got something out of this video and want to show your appreciation. Also, there are several ways you can send me a package. Oh, actually, there's just one way to send me your package. So yeah, make sure it's wrapped. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.